ideas that you had of quests, but then you decided against.
Okay, that's good. So question for the room. How many people have ever heard of the restaurant Nando's? Do you know Nando's? So if you haven't, it's okay. It's a South African fast food restaurant. It's a chain, and they have about 25, they have locations in 25 countries. And it was actually when I was finishing this quest last year, my brother sent me a link to their Wikipedia page. And on their Wikipedia page, it says, if you go to every Nando's location in all 25 countries around the world and save your receipts, then you can get a free meal for life, for the rest of your life, right? And so like my brother's like joking, he's like, hey Chris, like you should do this, you know, because people are always coming up to me and like, here's your thing, you know. But for just a moment I was like, wow, that's really interesting. Like what's that, how many countries are there? Like how many locations in each country? And like, why didn't I save my receipts when I was there before? And so fortunately I did not pursue that quest. So if there's anyone here who wants to take it on, please go ahead.
Nice.
That's great. Scott, maybe that's for you.
What are some other quests that other people have wanted you to do? Besides the like
it's always just something
reverse.
numerical. It's always like some like, here's this, you know, you should go to the moon, you should, you know, whatever, you should go with Richard Branson into space. But yeah, I don't know.
Can you talk about fear a little bit and the barrier to pursuing a quest that is fear?
Sure. I think we talked about excuses. I don't want to use the word excuses because that sounds kind of negative. You know, I think one of the obstacles that a lot of people experience, myself included, was like when you're doing something that's so much bigger than yourself, you do have lots of fears, and you're afraid of failure. You're afraid of being embarrassed. You're afraid of success. Maybe you're afraid of like change and what that might involve in your life, and maybe some logistical fears. I mean, just so many different things, I guess. And for me, and a lot of people that I talk to, they just tried to like deal with those things one by one, tried to tackle them logically, tried to acknowledge that this fear was like an ever-present thing, at least for many of us, maybe not for everybody, but not really giving it the decision-making authority. Like, I might be afraid of something, but I believe in the outcome again. I have this motivation to continue, therefore I'm going to continue. And so like fear is kind of like this, it's not really a byproduct, but it's just kind of something that's like off to the side. Maybe it never goes away, but I'm still going to do it, you know? It's like, I don't know, like a lot of things that we do in life that, you know, there's this quote from Eleanor Roosevelt, do one thing every day that scares you. You know, I do believe that as we embrace challenge, we're doing things that scare us, but ultimately it's good for us.
Have you heard of any stories of people that have started quests since reading your book? I mean, it just came out a few weeks ago, but I saw some stories online already of people that were like, oh my gosh, I gotta go do some stuff. Yeah,
there's some fun things out there. There's somebody who's doing this 100-day challenge, I think we looked at earlier on Medium. Yeah. Somebody last night in Santa Cruz who's actually a children's book author, and now she's gonna visit every independent bookstore in California that has a children's section, and if that goes well, she's gonna visit every independent bookstore with a children's section throughout the whole country. Cool. And so I think there's a lot of other stuff that's coming. I'm just like beginning now to compile it. And that's my greatest hope. Like my greatest hope is like, I don't want people to just be like, yeah, Chris, awesome book. You know, like I want people to be like, oh, like, you know, I read this book, or maybe I even just read like a part of it or something, but then I went and did something about it with my life. Like that to me is always the goal with this kind of writing and this kind of work. Or maybe I even just came to this talk, you know, or like I saw this online and like started thinking about my life and made this little change. Like that's always the goal, I think.
Totally. Well, and I think you're a catalyst in so many other ways, you know, not just through the book, but your blog and then World Domination Summit for sure. Something that I really liked that you did at the last World Domination Summit was ask people to speak into a video camera in sort of a private setting about some of the things that they hope to do. And then you picked out 5 or 6 people on the stage and kind of gave them a little boost with some gifts here and there and some introductions. Have you stayed in touch with those people? How are they doing? We have indeed, and we're going to bring them back next year, so it should be fun. Nice. One of the guys was named Mufadal, and he was awesome. He was a great guy. His whole goal was he wants to be a writer. He wants to write this book, and he comes from a really traditional conservative family, and they don't really understand, you know, why he wants to do unconventional work or whatever. So he has this whole kind of thing going on, and so we're trying to support him in that goal through various gifts and support and mentorship and all that. And I actually just saw him on the book tour in Chicago.
and he's doing well. He's working through the process, and he's going to ride a train next year to Portland to World Domination Summit, and he has to finish it by then. So hopefully he will.
Nice. So you gave a deadline.
We did, yeah. Every goal has a deadline, right? So
yeah, gotta have it. That's
right.
awesome. What's the next quest for you?
So I'm not going back to every country in reverse order. I'm not going to the moon. And I don't know specifically like what the one sentence, like here's the quest, but I do know that the transformation for me throughout the journey was I went from being like just my little introverted self, like traveling around the world on my own, to this amazing community of great people who participate on the blog and with the books and with World Domination Summit. And that changed the whole trajectory of everything for me and the whole focus of everything for me. And it was like, this is so great, you know. And I hope that in my life, visiting every country in the world is kind of like a footnote, you know. And like, oh, he went to every country in the world, but then like there were these awesome people like doing all these really fun things, and maybe like I connected them in some way, right? So I think the next focus is community, essentially.
Awesome, very cool. And speaking of which, I'd love to open it up to the people here. Does anyone have oh yeah, we got some hands already. Very cool. Joe, you want to ask a question?
I just wanted to ask a silly question perhaps. What was your policy on countries that changed or came new or otherwise when you were traveling?
Okay.
You know, since perhaps since you're traveling, South Sudan came out, East Timor, a couple other countries. So when new ones get added, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, great question. So fortunately, countries don't get added that often, at least fortunately for me. So I believe Jessica mentioned that I went to 193 countries. The original goal was to go to 192 because, as you alluded to, South Sudan gained independence probably about halfway through or so. And so I kind of debated like what to do or whatever, but I did in fact go there. So I decided to do it. East Timor, you also mentioned, that was the previous country to gain independence. And that actually happened, I forget the year, but it was before I officially began. So that was already on my list. So it's usually basically like every 10 years or so that a new country actually gains UN recognition. So it hasn't happened again yet. If there's a 194th country, then I'll probably get a lot of emails from people saying, like, what are you going to do? So we'll see. Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions? Oh, yeah. Basically.
So, finishing the quest, obviously a big deal for your birthday and the transformation you talked about. Maybe talk either specifically or in a general sense for quest. When you complete something big, there's sort of a postpartum kind of what do I do now, kind of this, you know, this trajectory and sort of the emptiness there. Can you talk about that?
Sure.
You know, oh, do I have to write a book now? Do I have to do something, or kind of one up yourself? Maybe talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful question. So, both for myself and for lots of people, you know, that I talk to, it is very common to come to the end of something and you're like, I've been doing this for 10 years, as we discussed, and you know, now it's done. And I don't want to be the person who has done that like for the rest of my life. And it was a little bit bittersweet. And actually, the bittersweet moment for me was more in the year before it. By the time I actually came to it, like I had kind of made peace with it and was like ready to do something else. But I did realize that it was like, wow, my life is going to be different from the way it has been until now, and that's probably good, but that also involves change.
Other questions back here? Yeah, Alex.
I thought the most compelling part of your story was how you took all this experience and turned it into some sort of creative output. And that creative output was an output of nonfiction, but still inspiring and so expressive. I'm curious, for those of us who are interested in taking experience like that, or a quest, as you put it, like that, what challenges do you foresee for those of us who are trying to put it in a way of fiction, or in a way maybe that's in the form of a poem, or form of a painting, or in the form of an album?
Sure.
What challenges do you foresee coming up, and two, how do you think you could overcome those challenges?
Great. That's a great question. I think there are challenges and opportunities, right? And the challenge is probably obvious to you. Like the challenge is like, okay, You know, are you a writer specifically, or what's you're a musician? Okay, great, that's right. So the challenge is like I'm creating this art form that doesn't necessarily tell people what to do, right? That is the challenge, you know. But yet I personally think that the goal of art is to move people and to inspire people and to challenge people, or, you know, to help them grow, or to do something like that. Like, you want to not be the same after you experience something. And so, you know, I mostly read fiction. I don't actually read a lot of nonfiction myself because I'm a nonfiction writer. So I can think of lots of novels that I've read that have been super inspiring to me and super, like, changed my worldview and changed my way of thinking. And I think, I mean, this is like a debatable point, right? But I think the goal of a great novel is essentially to challenge an ideal, or to move the reader, you know, or to help them think differently about something. And the same is true for music. So the challenge is what we've identified, like how to go from here to there. But I think the opportunity is actually so much greater, you know, in these non-linear forms of art. I think you actually, like, if you can crack this puzzle, like some people have done, we think about music that has really, like, just become universal and something that we all know, and that we all have these experiences, like, oh, the first time I heard that song, Imagine, you know, by John Lennon or something. You know, it's like, yeah, we all have our memories of this, right? So if you can crack that, then it actually has more, you know, more power, more opportunity than simply saying, like, okay, you know, here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3, which is what I do. It's very prescriptive. But I think maybe you have an opportunity to do something much greater than that.
May I ask a second question? Okay. So my second question was, I'm also a designer.
Oh, great.
And a digital designer. And generally, there's this general consensus that, say there's a bunch of rice on a table. People who are more experienced at design, people that aren't as, say, quote unquote, good at design, they'll want to take that rice that's up in a jumble and they'll want to put it in a line, so it's all organized. But someone who's maybe a quote unquote more talented designer will want to take that bit of rice and turn it into a smiley face. What do you think that means for taking your, what's that?
No, keep going, it's good.
What do you think that means for taking a quest and I guess, and maybe your previous answer answered it, but how do you take that quantitative data, you know, these experiences you've had, and turn it into that more romantic experience for the consumer?
So maybe that's the essence of creativity.
Yeah.
That's what creativity is.
Yeah.
And people will do that in different ways. And you know, that's why, like, we've been talking a lot about my project tonight, which you're thoughtful to ask those questions. I'm glad that some people care about it. But at its core, I think it was quite a simple project. I think it was quite a simple project because, as I said, I knew exactly what to do next. You know, and so I related to that. It was great. You know, for me, it was like this guy I talked to who was walking across America, you know, and I was like, tell me your challenges. And it was really hard to get straight answers from him because he's like, well, there's no challenge. I just kind of walk, you know, I just, like, one foot in front of the other, right? And I was like, huh, it's kind of interesting. That's how it is for me too, one country after another. So I think, you know, there's so many people doing projects that are actually much more interesting, right? You know, and that's the essence of creativity, is like they're actually like, they're taking that rice and they're not just doing what I would do, which would be like making it the line, but they are making something so much greater. So hopefully we'll have a future event and we can focus on all of those aspects.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point. So we're actually in this building. Below us is Vesuvio Cafe, which is a historic bar that a lot of the Beat Generation people frequented. Jack Kerouac among them. Is that a book that's inspired you? I know the prologue of
I don't
your
know
new
if
book
it's,
is.
I stole this, I use this phrase, on the road, which no one's ever used before. So, no, I don't actually know if Kerouac has inspired me, but he's certainly, you know, an awesome guy who's done a lot of stuff. So.
Totally. Very cool. I think we have time for one or two more questions. You had one in the front?
Yeah, so I was wondering, you said that sometimes you gotta undergo this quest even though you're kind of the only one that really believes in it. And I know that your grandmother Yuna got into
that's
it.
right.
She was you know, one of your first followers,
Right.
and I was kind of curious, like, was the rest of your family into it? And like, if not, then what was that like?
Yeah, was the rest of my family into it? I think they had been used to me doing a lot of random stuff at that point. So I don't know if they believed that I was really going to do it, but I don't know if they were super surprised. You know, I think that was just kind of like, I think it's just like I said, like, in the beginning, experience produces confidence. So I didn't have this huge vision of doing all this stuff, but as I embraced like travel, as I did up more things, like then I got the vision to go to every country in the world. I think for them it was the same kind of thing. At first, like they heard I was in Vietnam or something, they kind of freaked out. Like, why is Chris in Vietnam? Like, for what? For what? You know? And but then after that, it's like we fast forward like a year, you know, and then like my dad would send an email. He's like, Chris, I have no idea where you are in the world, but just wanted to ask you something, you know. So they kind of got used to it over time.
Thank you. Last one.
Okay.
All right,
Smiley.
Smiley. Let's do it.
So one of the things I really love about all your books is they challenge people to think unconventionally about their lives. They say, hey, there's all these people living kind of in what I'll call mediocrity. You don't have to do that, and here's why. And it's kind of interesting, I think, that this third book kind of encourages people to maybe go back to the second book in terms of, okay, here's this quest, here's this thing I'm embarking on. It might be 100 days, it might be a year, it might be 2 or 3 years. How do I kind of take that meaning, that fulfillment I'm getting from that quest and turn it into something that maybe I want to do for the rest of my life? So my question is, if anyone you interviewed that actually made it to the book or didn't make it to the book has kind of taken their quest and turned it into a business, turned it in kind of to what they're doing every day, or maybe their aspiration for what they're going to do with the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And the second book being the $100 Startup.
That's right.
Sorry, the second book being.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm thinking this through. I like what you said about like providing alternatives. I think this is what you do in your work as well. You know, showing people that here's this path and here's these other alternatives, and you decide for yourself, but just know that there is more than one path. You know, I think a lot of people that I talk to, like this quest that they found became something that was their vocation later, you know, as well. The guy who walked across Turkey, you know, originally this was his personal quest. He wasn't really doing it for any kind of attention or whatever. But then he met all these great people along the way, and he was also American, so he was thinking about communicating just the value of deep kind of travel, you know, to America. So, you know, he started a whole foundation, you know, related to that. There's a woman who cooked a meal from every country in the world, also just personal quest. She wasn't able to travel, but she wanted to raise her family with an international perspective. So that was just her own little thing, but then she started blogging about it and posting her recipes online. I believe she's selling some digital products. And she's writing a book now for National Geographic. So there's a lot of people who actually found vocation through Quest.
All right, so last question is, if you had to leave everyone here with one call to action,
Oh, right.
one thing that they should go home and do tonight,
Oh, wow. Okay.
what would it be?
Well, this is a diverse group of people, all doing different stuff. So one of the things I really, really liked, conversations I liked, was with a woman named Elise Blaha, who is like a professional crafter. She has a great podcast, she has a blog she writes on every day, she does all this stuff, like all these serial quests and serial little projects. And the advice that I took from her was, she said something like, you know, everybody's always encouraging you to think outside the box, and maybe that's helpful for like some things, but that's also intimidating for a lot of us, because we're like, well, like the sky's the limit, but that's not so great because I actually need some help in figuring out what I want to do. So her advice, and the advice that she applied to her life was, she's like, I tried not to think outside the box. I made myself a box and I got in the box. She's like, my advice was like, get in the box, Elise, right? And so she crafted all these parameters for her life and for what she wanted to make. And so the advice or the challenge, the call to action, is to think about these things that you like to do. If you have this crazy idea in your head, like I did, like other people did, if you don't, that's okay. Maybe there's something that you're excited about. Maybe there's something that bothers you about the world. Think about those things and then get in your box. And when I say get in your box, I mean create some parameters for it and create some structure and create some rules even. I don't usually like rules, but these are rules that you create for yourself. They're not imposed on you. So that's why visiting every country in the world made so much sense for me. It wasn't just travel a bunch of places. You know, that's why cooking a meal in every country was so great for Sasha Martin, that woman who did that from Oklahoma, because it wasn't just cook a bunch of foreign foods. Like she had these rules, she had these parameters, you know, every country, no exception. So whatever it is that you're up to, whatever you want to do, find a way to make your parameters and get in the box.
Awesome, very cool. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.